Welcome to Even Tacos Fall Apart, a podcast where we explore mental health one story at a time. I'm MommaFoxFire, and today's episode is all about ghosts, spirituality, and what adrenaline actually does to your body after trauma. And don't click away thinking this is going to get weird on you. I mean, first of all, we're always weird here, but hang on for a second, because this conversation goes places you are not expecting, even after that intro. Let's start with the part that is just straight up biology, because this matters and nobody talks about it enough. When something traumatic happens to you, your body floods with adrenaline. That is a normal, healthy response. Your body's trying to protect you. The problem is that adrenaline doesn't just disappear when the danger is gone. It can sit in your body for months, years, sometimes decades. And when that happens, it stops being a survival tool and starts being a source of chronic rage, anxiety, depression, and behaviors that look from the outside like a personality problem, but are actually a physiological one. There's a condition called pyroluria that connects directly to this, and it involves deficiencies in key vitamins and minerals that most doctors don't even think to look for. If you've ever felt like you were doing all the right things and still could not get your nervous system to calm the hell down, this episode might start to explain some things for you. Now, the ghosts. I know a lot of folks who listen to this show have experienced something they could not explain. A feeling in a house, a presence after a loss, a sense that something was off and they could not put their finger on it. Most of us have been trained to dismiss that, to chalk it up to stress or grief or an overactive imagination. But what if some of it was real? And what if there was actually something practical you could do about it? My guest today is Tina Erwin. She's a retired Navy commander who spent 20 years working with the U.S. submarine force. She has also spent her adult life studying metaphysics, helping trauma survivors heal, and yes, helping spirits cross over. She has written 9 books, and she's worked with veterans, abuse survivors, psychic children, and people who have been let down by every conventional system that was supposed to help them. She developed something called the crossing over prayer, which she teaches people to use themselves for free because she believes you shouldn't have to pay someone else to help your own loved ones find peace. What I love about Tina is that she's not precious about any of this. She's a military officer. She is logical and direct, and she will call something what it is. She's not trying to sell you on anything airy-fairy. She's connecting dots between science, spirituality, and the very real, very physical experience of living in a body that has been through some shit. This conversation covers a lot of ground. We talk about how trauma and adrenaline interact in the body and what you can actually do about it. We talk about why some spirits don't cross over after death and what that can mean for the living people around them. We talk about psychic ability in the military, remote viewing, a wild true crime story involving a storage unit and a human trafficking ring, and what it looks like when someone finally shifts from just surviving to actually building a life. It's a lot. It's a good kind of a lot. So grab whatever you need to drink, get comfortable, and let's get into it. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another Mental Health Monday here on Even Tacos Fall Apart. I am delighted to be here with you today. You'll notice things look just a smidge different, and we're using a different platform today. So here's hoping that everything goes right, even with my awful luck with technology. We're gonna hope for a smooth, easygoing, wonderful stream. But today, I am joined by Tina Erwin. She is a retired Navy commander with a fascinating combination of skills that we're going to get into. Tina spent 20 years working with the U.S. submarine force, but she also dedicated her life to studying metaphysics and helping people heal from trauma. And we all know that's a really popular topic, trauma, just to talk about on mental health podcasts and everything, and here especially. But she specializes in helping people understand how adrenaline affects the body after traumatic experiences, and she's developed practical tools for managing that. But getting really interesting, Tina also helps ghosts cross over, and we're going to talk about that tonight as well, especially those attached to veterans and trauma survivors. So you can kind of see it all starting to come together here. She has written 9 books on metaphysics and created the Crossing Over Prayer, which she teaches people to use themselves. She believes helping spirits move on is an act of compassion, And we will all want that for ourselves someday. So, welcome to the show, Tina. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. I am thrilled to be here.
Yeah, I'm really happy to have you here. If you guys are looking to connect with Tina, I've got some links for you to her website, to her YouTube channel, to her Instagram. Feel free to pop over to those and connect with her, and then make sure to give her a follow once you do get over there. Give some of her content a like and a share and all that good stuff. So, Tina, what inspired you to start sharing your story through your content and through your speaking?
Because I feel that sometimes if you can understand the why behind something, you take the airy fairy and you kind of pitch it, and you come down to the marriage of science and spirituality, which is all the science of God in the first place. Then all of a sudden you can begin to make some sense out of the things that are happening to you. And what happens, I mean, as a retired naval officer, I mean, virtually everybody who gets out of the Navy is on disability
Mm.
except me. I was the only one I know of that didn't get out with a disability. So if you can begin to understand some of these things, how does karma work? How does what happened to you play into karma? And how do you put these puzzle pieces together in your life? And what happens when you die? And what happens after death? And how do you help someone who has died? And
Mm.
all things all have a connection. And I felt that by writing about this in theme and variation, people could begin to get some understanding and maybe it would help them solve some puzzles or riddles in their lives.
Yeah, so you're approaching helping others from all sorts of different angles, and that's just something that you were drawn to do?
Well, when you're in the military, it's a life of service.
Mhm.
Military is only about people. I
Yeah.
mean, I worked for the submarine force for 20 years and they had a successful mission if they never fired a weapon in anger. I mean, that was the philosophy. And these were some of the finest people you'd ever want to meet. And they had wonderful families and their wives were amazing. And so, uh, and they offered me opportunities. I mean, I joined the Navy in 72, so I'm pretty ancient here, but I was offered opportunities that were astounding. And I had a pretty remarkable career for, a little person here. So I had a lot of good experiences, but not everybody has good experiences with the military. So it's a function of I saw some of the best of people and the worst of people and situations. I was not in a war zone. However, when I was in college, I was in a war between Salvador and Honduras, and they were bombing the city I was in.
Oh, wow.
So trauma affects you on a variety of levels. So I have a modest experience with some of that trauma.
Yeah. So, do you have a true crime story that fascinates you? It sounds quite different question, but it's just like a get to know you kinda thing.
Well, I have this very odd skill called remote viewing, and I have people from all over the country and different parts of the world ask me to remote view a location and clear it. Okay. So I wrote a book, Ghost Stories from the Ghost Point of View, and this story is in book 3. And I was asked by a guy in Virginia Beach to clear a set of storage units that he had on the Eastern Shore. You have to cross the bridge to get to the Eastern Shore. It's not very well, not many people live there. So he says, "Can you remote view this?" Because I've done a lot of his properties. Sure. So I'm remote viewing it and I'm going slipping in and out of all of the storage units because he's the owner. So I had his permission. And I'm clearing things and I get into this one storage unit and I'm projecting energy because I was living in California. So I'm projecting energy 3,000 miles away and I'm in this storage unit and I see this woman standing there and I'm thinking, what is she doing inside a storage unit with no lights on? And so she says, "Can you see me?" And I said, "Yes." And she said, "How do you see me?" And I said, "Well, it's complicated, but what happened to you?" And she said, "I don't know. I was having a drink with a guy at a mixer in college. And the next thing I know, I'm here and I don't know how I got here and I can't breathe. So
Oh,
I
wow.
immediately bring an angel in and I'm thinking, she's a ghost and I'm going to cross her over. And I'm looking at this angel and he's shaking his head. Nope, she's not a ghost. I'm thinking, oh my gosh, what do I have? So I left an angel with her because I couldn't, I can't cross her over because she's not dead. And what I realized was something happened to her, which wasn't too hard to figure out. She slipped a roofie and my feeling was she was going to be human trafficked. She
Mm.
was this beautiful blonde. She told me her name. I'm not going to say her name on the air. She told me her name and I cleared the rest of his property. And then I called my sister and I said, oh my gosh, this woman's not dead. Where is she? And so we thought, if you're a psychic and you call the police, they discount anything you said. So what we did was we checked all the missing and exploited children in Virginia and Maryland, and we found her. And she had been
Wow.
missing a year. And so my sister called it in, and we didn't tell them that it came from a psychic. And then we called the owner of the storage unit and said, we think there's something in it. It's a unit with a number 7 or 17 or 27, but I think it has a 7 in the number. Those were some of the clues that were given to the hotline. In 24 hours, the police were there with a cadaver dog. And they roped the entire place out off, and they spent hours there. And the detective said they were so grateful for this tip, and they were going to follow up and see. They had so much evidence that was in that storage unit. And so 6 months later, what we found out was that that tip exposed an entire human trafficking network in Miami, Florida. They found her alive. She was returned to her family, and so were
Wow.
I don't know how many other young women. So that's my true crime story. But the police
Yeah.
never knew that it was a psychic tip.
Yeah, yeah. Have you had a lot of interactions with police where they're like, "Yeah, no, we don't believe in this."
I've had several. I
Mhm.
did another one in Virginia, and the ghost she was standing where she was murdered. She was murdered the day before her wedding. And she told me who murdered her, how he murdered her, what he did with his clothes. So I went to the police with that. One detective was interested, the other detective, and they were begging for tips.
Yeah.
I gave him absolute specifics and they just discounted it. So he's still out there as a murderer. I don't do it a lot because it's not always you have to have a long-term reputation with them. Most of them still don't believe you. They think it's mumbo jumbo. But when you look at the quantum entanglement and the string theory, when you look at basically astrophysics, what I do makes perfect sense. Psychics who really are the real thing and want to help other people. I had no agenda except to help this young girl she had been wrapped in a rug, which is why she couldn't breathe.
Wow.
So that was my true crime story.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's really difficult, I think, to get a skeptic on board, right? Unless they can really have something just undeniable in front of them. I know when my grandfather went missing, we had a psychic come in and try to help, and they kept talking about water and woods, and that wound up being where his body was found many years later. But it was like eh, law enforcement didn't want to act on anything related to it 'cause they were like, that's we're not gonna go on that. That's not real, basically, is what we were told.
Well, the other problem the police have, and this is a legitimate problem, nothing that you offer them can be used in court because
Yes. Yeah,
you cannot prove inevitable discovery.
right.
I've helped with 3 missing person cases. And if you're a remote viewer, a missing person case is one of the very hardest things you can ever try to do because a person can be moved. So
Yeah.
what you think you see may not be there. They may be alive. And 2 of them, the people were alive, and 1, the person died. And there was a case on the eastern near Wallops Island where these 2 boys were missing and They were murdered, and they eventually found their bodies where I could see that they had been murdered. They stumbled upon an activity they shouldn't have seen, and so they couldn't let witnesses go. So, but missing persons for any psychic, it's excruciatingly difficult.
Yeah, most definitely. Now you have said in a lot of your talks that ghosts just seem to find you. When did you first realize that ghosts seem to find you? When did you realize you had that ability?
It's one of these things. A lot of people have certain levels of psychic ability as children. My precious Siamese died when I was 7, and I could see her ghost. And I was just heartbroken. She was my best friend. But it's like all hell broke loose once I got married. And I've been married 50, almost 53 years. And but once I met my husband, we had a several major past lives together. So this life we got to have a whole life. Once connected, it's like they would find me. I'd had attempted possession. It's like everywhere they would go, or you're in a hospital and they come at you like flies. I don't know why ghost helpers don't go to hospitals. There's just wall to wall dead people there. Anyway, getting excited here. And I realized I had to learn how to deal with this, because if you see them or hear them or feel them all the time, it is incredibly distracting. Fortunately, it's not 100% of the time or you'd go mad. And if you don't have a methodology to cross them over, and I didn't know how to do that at first.
Yeah.
I lived in a haunted house in Charleston, South Carolina. Of course, the whole state's haunted. So there you go. I didn't know what to do with the ghost that was in the house. I called Duke University parapsychology. Nobody knew what to do. And I'm thinking, why is this so hard? And then through a chain of events, I learned how to cross these souls over. And then it took me a while to develop a faster and faster and faster technique. Once I mastered that, then all of a sudden I was able to remote view, which carries a massive responsibility if you do it. So then I realized that you can't be the only one who knows this. That sounds like an ego trip, but it's wrong. You shouldn't have to pay a psychic to cross your child over who died, or your grandmother. You shouldn't have a psychic hunting your grandparents, as a ghost hunter. You should be able to help them. Or if you buy a house that's haunted, shouldn't have to pay a psychic to come. You should be able to do this yourself in the privacy of your own home. So I've had the crossing over prayer beta tested literally all over the world. So had some pretty astounding experiences with it.
Yeah. Can you walk us through a little bit of how your 20-year Navy career intersects with your ghost work? It's not a combo that we hear all the time, military and ghost work.
No, it isn't. But you'd be surprised how many really, really psychic people there are in the military who have had astonishing experiences that they couldn't explain. I mean, if you deliberately submerge a ship, you had better feel the ship and the crew. And that I mean, I saw it, but not everybody's going to see it. I'm watching all these left brain men use psychic ability over and over and over. I had one captain tell me, he said, I knew we were going to cry. I knew we were going to have a collision. I knew it. I could feel it coming. I told the Pentagon that this was going to happen, and they didn't understand how I knew it. And when they collided with a Russian submarine, he was vindicated, unfortunately.
Yeah.
So, so what I'm watching officer and enlisted men have these sensations, have these feelings. And I realized that everyone has psychic ability. You cannot drive a car without it. That guy's going to change lanes. You should hesitate at that stoplight. That kid's going to run out in front of you again. And as I watched all of these people start to apply their psychic ability on an astonishing range of levels, then I realized that you know this is so common. When I was a lieutenant junior grade, my husband and I were stationed in Italy, and I was in the NATO buildings that were built, but they were built by the Nazis during World War II. all those buildings were haunted, and you could hear people walking above you. You could hear people screaming. To be in those buildings at night, if you had the duty, was just terrifying. And officer after officer and enlisted person after enlisted, because did you know? Do you think those buildings are haunted? I'm hearing things. Well, I thought, well, good Lord, is encountering this. Why are we making it like it's airy fairy? These are very logical, down to earth people. They're seeing something, they're feeling something, their skin's crawling. Maybe we should help them understand the science behind what they're experiencing. And when I got out of the Navy, I had an amazing resume and nobody would hire me. And I realized that I didn't need any more corporate experience. It wasn't that there was something wrong. It was ironically that there was something right. I had something else to do. And it was this. So I started a computer company and I was a value added reseller for Apple Computer for a while. But a lot of big tech is not always honest. And so it was not a happy experience. But I learned a lot. And that wasn't what I was supposed to do.
Yeah.
This is what I'm supposed to do. And I love what I do. I love the ability to help someone who's feeling haunted or a child that's had a dark being with them for 4 or 5 years and can't function in school. The mother and a lot of really Christian moms call me. Don't tell anybody I called you, but there's something wrong. And I can remove that being. And all of a sudden, the true personality of the child comes out and they are animated and happy and they smile at you. They're not hidden and dark. It is, I've done it repeatedly and no one can understand what happened and it's hard to explain. So something else is going on here. What's happening today? We're living in really exciting times. More and more of these kinds of understandings are beginning to come forward. I mean, it's okay to say, well, I think that house is haunted. I mean, I have a lot of clients who are real estate agents, and they'll say, we're having this problem and this problem and this problem. What can we do? And I said, I can't do anything without the owner's permission. I have to follow spiritual law. There's a law that applies to what I do, and you cannot even put your toe on the line. Have to follow the law. Someone says no, hands off. I can't touch it.
Yeah.
And so a lot of times I will suggest that the real estate agent sit down with the owner and just read the crossing over prayer. Maybe you don't need me. That's it's Occam's razor. It's a simple solution, which gives everyone the power to take care of it themselves. So it's a little bit, I began to see how things worked in the Navy, how common this was, and that what we really needed were answers that everyone could use. So that was the juxtaposition and the coming together of forces.
Yeah. Do you draw a distinction between instinct and psychic ability? Is that gut feeling? Do you consider that to be psychic ability?
It's all the same thing. Men have to have a name for it that gives them a feeling of, I'm still in charge, although I'm scared half to death.
Yeah.
Okay. If that's the name that you want to use, a word, I don't care.
Yeah.
I mean, I have some astounding stories of things that happen on submarines that there's no other word for it other than something took place that's not explainable by any scientific method. And one guy saved 150 men with a gut instinct.
Wow. Now you work with folks, I mean, you talked about some of the work that you do, but you also work with people who've experienced severe trauma. What's the connection between unresolved trauma and adrenaline in the body?
Adrenaline is a remarkable substance and it comes from adrenal glands. When you are in a war zone, and war zone could be someplace overseas, it could be in any conflict, it can be a child who is experiencing screaming, fighting parents. It's every time your parent comes to beat you with a belt buckle. I have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of clients with horrific childhoods. One of the common thing is when that monster came toward them with whatever they were going to be abused with, including sexual abuse or I mean, the things people do to their children are
Yeah.
so hard. That child, teenager, adult's body becomes flooded with adrenaline so that they can figure out what to do, and that is a normal process. The problem is, and when people are treating post-traumatic stress disorder, they never look at adrenaline poisoning. When
Mhm.
you certainly see this in a war zone, but people who are abused as children don't ever get that same condition of understanding. If your family is the war zone, then you have adrenaline poisoning, and it can cause a lot of behavioral problems that mean that your adrenals are blown, too much adrenaline. And when when that child gets mad and they say, oh, well, they're acting out. Well, when you have a person who has blown adrenal glands, and I'll give you an example. I had a client in Florida and I was working with her mother in Tennessee. She and the girl and her father lived in Florida. There'd been divorces and deaths and all of these problems. This 17-year-old girl had a lot of adrenaline. Well, what was happening was she was having murderous ideation. I've had several of those clients. Every day she got up, these thoughts were coming into her head to murder everyone in school.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And this mother had taken her daughter to every psychiatrist, psychotherapist you can possibly imagine. And they all said nothing they could do. And I said, and you called a psychic? And she said, well, you came highly recommended. So I said, well, I have a feeling this isn't a psychic issue. In this case, your adrenals are blown. This is a logical, biologic situation. When your adrenals are blown, you have a condition called pyroluria. And what happens is when adrenals are blown, you don't have enough pyroxidine, which is vitamin B. And anyone who wants to look up pyroluria, Pyroluria, please look this up. And what happens is when you have a vitamin and supplement deficiency, you have to balance it. One of the other problems is adrenaline sits in the body. You don't wash it out. There are not a lot of things that wash it out. One of the things that will wash adrenaline out of the body because you need a blood cleanser is a fruit juice from Tahiti called noni, Noni. It is from the Morinda citrifolia plant. Morinda citrifolia, the word is noni, Noni, and I actually put it in my tea. I've been drinking it for 30 years. It was introduced into this country in 1996 by the Mormon company, Morinda. And what noni does is it's a blood cleanser. It starts to wash the adrenaline out of your system. And a lot of depression simply leaves the person because they're overburdened by the adrenaline. But it's not enough. To truly get it out of your system, you have to develop, and I'm not prescribing, I'm being very, very careful. Consult with your doctor who will probably not help you much, but
100%.
anyway, sorry. So the supplements that you could consider exploring are vitamin C and E. Also vitamin D. Most people are horrendously deficient in vitamin D, but especially vitamin B6, which is pyroxidine, which is also called P5P. Critical that you use P5P in combination with manganese, magnesium, and there's different kinds of magnesium. So you kind of have to work on that. Fish oil, zinc, and copper. And I found out about this because there was a doctor, some country doctor in Indiana was seeing all these people who were angry. He also worked in a prison and he started taking hair samples. And what he saw were all of these individuals who had the same vitamin and mineral deficiencies. And that it completely changed their personalities. It was astounding. So with this girl, this teenager in Florida, I finally was able to get her on the phone, and she had started smoking. And of course, her mother went berserk. Oh my God, you're smoking. And I said, time out. Let me guess, you're smoking because smoking is a vasoconstrictor, which means that the only way you can control the murderous ideation is to have your vessels constrict so that you don't get the same amount of adrenaline. And she said, bingo. Nobody else figured that out. Okay, is this science 101? I'm not that bright. It's really, it's just basic science. So what happened was I made a suggestion to the mother and the father and the teenager. She was a good person. She just didn't understand what was happening to her. And talk therapy isn't going to help you with those supplements. I'm sorry, it isn't. So she started on the supplements and she could relax because she was terrified she'd end up in prison. Just she could tell the difference in the chemistry, and no one had an answer. No one looks at nutrition. This is one of the biggest issues right now. Doctors and psychiatrists, psychotherapists don't look at what nutritionally is happening inside a mortal body. When you are a veteran of whatever, you can't just give them some drug that helps with depression. You have to treat the whole. This was one of the biggest issues that I had in the Navy, was military medicine is a disaster. They would treat a body part. They'd treat a piece of a person. And if what they were using to treat that piece would harm the rest of the body, they couldn't be concerned with that. Unfortunately, since they worked for me, I was concerned. And I would not let my crew do what their doctor said. If I sent a crew member there until we went over what was done for them, and I brought in a second and third opinion to make sure that what the first doctor prescribed wouldn't kill my sailor.
Right.
That's how desperate I was to make sure my crew was not harmed by military medicine. So when a person has been in a war zone, you have a multiplicity of problems. When you have experienced trauma and you have an adrenaline overload, all of a sudden the world you live is no longer safe. There is a fear factor which triggers the adrenaline coming to you. So if you and I are cut off in traffic, we might get this much adrenaline. Someone with either pyroluria or trauma gets this much adrenaline. You can't control that rage. You don't even know what's come over you. So if you go to anger management, newsflash, you need to do a little more than that. If you're in a war zone and all your buddies got blown up, but you survived, they're probably hanging around with you. So if you're going to help somebody with trauma, you need layers of protocol. First of all, you cross over all the dead that are with the person. That alone is going to make them feel better and not as depressed, because the guys that died may have no idea they're dead. The second thing is you're going to look at their nutrition. You're going to wash the adrenaline out of the body. You're going to find out, let them tell you what happened and tell them they're not crazy for what they're feeling. So I know I rattled on a lot there, but hopefully that could be helpful for your listeners.
Yeah. So, how long does adrenaline stay in your system after a trauma?
Can stay a very, very long time. And that's why you get adrenaline poisoning, because you can't your body becomes so saturated with it. That's why the person who goes and has an experience. And oh, and the other thing is, if they drink alcohol because they're depressed, which you see a lot, the depression and the alcoholism go hand in hand. Alcohol is why I cannot drink. Alcohol drops your auric field, your force field to zero, and you are completely open. Any ghost can come in and inhabit you. You can be possessed by up to 60 different ghosts at a time. So that's why when somebody quote blacks out, and Another ghost simply comes in and takes over, and they've committed murder, they've committed rape, they've done atrocities. The guy wakes up and is sober now and has no idea what happened because literally the drunk ghosts who were pretty horrible took over their bodies.
So, are there any practical tools? And maybe this is like a in the moment kind of thing, or maybe it's a longer term thing. You mentioned supplements and everything, but are there any practical tools folks can use to manage adrenaline's effects?
Honestly, one, don't drink alcohol, to be blunt. Alcohol is not your friend. It may taste delicious and put it in a rum cake, but for God's sake, don't drink it because it will exacerbate whatever it is that you're feeling and make you vulnerable. Number two, start drinking something like noni juice. It's a fruit juice. It's not a drug. It's been used for 5,000 years by the people of the Pacific Asian Islanders. All of Southeast Asia uses this. It's used, I mean, I there are several books out about how amazing this is. Everybody talks about acai berry, and that's really great, but there's nothing quite like this. They sell it all over the internet. Start to wash that out, and it changes your mood because you're cleansing this. And if you have toxic metals, and there are a lot of different things. People do cleanses once or twice a year, and they just beat the hell out of their body when they do it. They feel terrible. Oh, I got to do this cleanse. It's almost like you're punishing yourself. Some people use French green clay, just, like an eighth of a teaspoon a day and something. And the clay attaches to the metals and starts to pull this darkness out. And one of the biggest things that happens with trauma, especially abusive origins of trauma, is that person is separated from God. And it doesn't matter what faith you do or don't believe in. When you can establish a deep and abiding connection to the divine, and it's private. Go stand in a forest, and I am a tree hugger. I live in a forest and I hug my trees. There is a documented connection between the energy field of a tree in the mycelium under the ground that go for God knows how far and connect to every other thing in the forest in your electrical field, which brings peace and calm. A lot of the Asian cultures call it forest bathing because you're breathing in pine needles, especially pinyon pine, which is really cleansing. When you connect to nature, or you're standing by the sea, or you're breathing in the salty air, all of these things begin to reestablish the electrical connection you have with the earth. Go barefooted at the beach, go barefooted in the grass, so that you are establishing your connection to the earth, your connection to nature. And it's as if you're opening up these pathways to the light of the divine. And those are huge. Another thing that really helps if you engage in prayer. That's why I wrote the Crossing Over Prayer book. There are 88 prayers here. If you don't know how to talk to God, there's an introductory prayer. A lot of people feel completely alienated because of what their churches did to them, because of the abuse they suffered in church. And anybody who talks about connecting to God feels like you don't know how bad it was. I don't, but mortal people did that. Mortal people who had a choice, and they earned karma for that. They earned magnified karma because they knew it was wrong and they separated the soul from God. That carries with it horrific karma. You can't even imagine. When you reestablish it, build a relationship on your own terms, in your own way, and you start talking to God and you start sending healing to the world, and you build a partnership where, suppose you were to send loving healing to every other abused person in the world, not as a martyr, but as a person who is healing themselves. As you help others to heal, so are you also healed. You're sending out the light and the love of God to everyone else who is suffering. You don't know who they are. It's without judgment, it's without prejudice. These are dynamic things that help you to heal. Let me stop for a minute. How are we doing?
No, I think all of that is really great, and I love a lot of the concepts that you're bringing up are ones that I'm interested to dive into later on my own time, and just like forest bathing sounds really cool. I want to look into that a little bit more for myself. But we're talking about trauma and trauma survivors and all of this kind of thing. Can you have trauma symptoms even if you don't remember a specific traumatic event?
Yes, you can have trauma symptoms that you can't explain. Some of them are the subtle, constant suicidal ideation that you can't
Mm.
figure out where it's because something in you was so violated. I had a client many years ago who was gang raped at the age of 5 on Easter Sunday, and her
Wow.
mother knew about it. She wasn't protected. When she was 21, she was raped and someone broke into her apartment and raped her. She didn't remember it. I have a lot of unusual methods, but to go back, I had no idea what happened to her. I couldn't make that up if I tried. And I was having her work with a homeopath to help her balance the energy of what happened to her. Grief will throw you into trauma. If your child dies and you're in grief, the adrenaline of the moment of discovering your child, your husband, your friend, your sister, your neighbor, all of a sudden, and you're involved in that, there's your adrenaline, there's your grief, there's your depression. Everybody wants you to just get over it. You cannot snap your fingers. Doesn't work that way. You have to work through it. So when when you have these traumas and you don't remember what happened to you, and this woman had been to every psychiatrist and psychotherapist, and they couldn't find it. And again, if I can't help a person, I'm going to tell them. But we're and I'm not the right person for everybody. First, I'm the first one to admit that. In some cases, I am the right person, and once we found it, and she was able to bring up, "Oh my god, that explains this, and this, and this." And the betrayal by her relatives who did this to her and her mother were so massive that when you bring it up, it makes you physically sick. So again, to wash this awful feeling inside of you physically out. When you first discover it, you throw up. It's so nauseating what happens. I know this is really heavy stuff, but I'm hoping that people listening to this will go, I'm not crazy. There are other situations. One woman had 17 family members commit suicide.
Oh my
Seven.
gosh.
She was having suicidal ideation. So it's when somebody comes to me and it's usually over the phone, it's like emotional braille. You have to feel what's really happened with them. Once, you realize 17, people say, "Oh, suicide's contagious." Not really. You just have all of these dead people hanging around because they're so guilty they took their lives. Once they were crossed over, it's like someone went click, her suicidal ideation vanished. She got married. She started a business. She woke up happy every day. She didn't have 17 dead people hanging around her. So you can't say, oh, it's always this. This woman was not raped. This woman didn't suffer other than having all these people commit suicide. She may have stopped a family pattern of suicide simply by helping the dead. That's why, for me, what I do is really interesting because there's no two people who have the same issue. It's theme and variation. And some people you can only help to a certain degree. The woman who didn't, who was had those horrible rapes, could not be married. The thought of being with a man was so repulsive. She simply couldn't do it. And she wanted to know if I thought that made her a bad person. Well, first of all, it's not my job to judge anyone. The second thing was you have to heal what happened. If that takes most of your life, then give yourself the time. Love yourself. Be patient. Be kind to the body. Be kind to yourself. and let's start sending prayer. Because what happened was she became a ghost magnet. She worked in a hospital. She was a medical records administrator. She worked in a hospital. So we developed a special crossing over prayer that she could use. So all of a sudden, her life changed because the ghosts needed her help. She she had a job, but now she had a spiritual purpose every single day. She could feel them leave. And they would say, "Thank you, thank you." She could feel them touch her arm. And something inside of her started to show light. There'd been so much darkness. It started to be replaced because by saying the prayers and helping the dead, she connected to God in her own very private way. And she would walk into the hospital with a pair of angels with her every day.
That's really. We're about to shift into talking about some of the crossing over aspects, but before we do, I just want to take a minute. This came up in our community earlier today, and it's come up before, but for those who are either witnessing traumatic events that are occurring across the US right now via all sorts of social media and videos, if you're there in person, anything that you're going through, there are studies that show that playing Tetris after witnessing or experiencing a traumatic event can really lower the symptoms of PTSD. And so, if that is something that you are interested in, there's a way to play it for free. I just posted that link right there. And just a quick reminder to take care of yourselves, especially right now, but always. And they've tested this with combat victims as well. They've tested this with car crash victims. They've tested this with domestic abuse. The only thing that hasn't been proven is whether or not it helps with CPTSD, which is more on the domestic side generally. But there's all kinds of studies that they've done. I'll post one in the chat right now as well. But if you are experiencing trauma currently and you want to lessen the intrusive thoughts, the recurring thoughts, the kind of playing it back in your mind, go play Tetris. It's a really easy way. It's also just a nice break from scrolling all of this news that's coming out right now. Or even if you've been in something recently, it's an opportunity to go and maybe help yourself a little bit. So just wanted to throw that out there because it did come up earlier today in our community, and I know that for a lot of people it's proven to be very helpful. So you've talked about the crossing over with spirits quite a bit. So why do some spirits not cross over? And what are the common reasons that they've maybe given you?
Every person's death is as unique as they are in life. And we have a tendency to lump it together, but it's unique for each person. Some people have no idea they're dead. And it's quite a shock when you encounter them and they think they're alive. Some people know they're dead and they take a delight in haunting the living for extremely nefarious purposes. Some people are so guilty, and this includes many a Christian lady who went to church 4 times a week and twice on Sunday and tells me God can't love me because I'm a sinner. I was born in sin and I died in sin. God can't love me. And when I bring in angels and the prayer brings in angels for them, and they are reminded that God loves, period. It's not a caveat. There is no differentiation. We are loved, period. And when that angel wraps this light around that soul and they look into the face of this angel, it's like they just float into this light. It is such a beautiful thing. Children have absolutely no idea what to do. None. Babies don't know what to do. Everybody thinks they magically just go into heaven, but I can assure you they do not. They absolutely need help. And some people who took their own lives, suicides, let no one judge someone who took their own life. We cannot know the emotional pain that they have experienced. They need compassion. They need deep and abiding love. And I have the compassion prayer for suicide in the Crossing Over Prayer book. But these prayers are free on ghosthelpers.com. They're absolutely free. The big ones are, crossing over your animal. Animals are critically important for people. Murder, suicide and the general crossing over prayer. The crossing over prayer book has 88 additional prayers for all different kinds of situations. So when you find someone who's taken their own life, their guilt is so towering that they cause their family so much pain, and it's not any better in the darkness that they're in because it's a low frequency. When your frequency is so low that you will take your own life because the frequency above that is murder. That tells you something. So when you are willing to use violence against yourself for whatever the reason, it's very difficult for you to see the light. So without judgment, you cross that soul over, then you have helped them. And on a huge level, have the very essence of their soul restored. When that happens, especially if that person led an arduous life or they were tortured on so many different levels we can't imagine, the restoration of their soul is absolutely critical. Not because I say so, but because it is the very nature of the divine to restore and love us. So the what the prayers do is they explain what the situation is. I need this assistance. Would you please help me? Please take this soul. You're providing direction. And then you'll hear these statements that say right now, because in the ether, in the quantum field, there is no time. So you have to say when you want this to happen, which is right now. You don't want that soul to occur. If someone is a murderer, let's say someone committed murder, and we've certainly seen that. I have a crossing over prayer for murderers because they haunt the living and they haunt the dead. And when they die, more and more of their soul is shaved off and they move into what are called the darker realms. And they come back and murder again and again and again. When you cross them over, as it says in the 23rd Psalm, which appears in almost every faith on the planet, by the way, he restoreth my soul. Maybe the next life, this person will not murder. The karma the soul created through murder doesn't go away. That still has to be resolved. It's way beyond my pay grade. But that soul may probably not kill the next lifetime. That's why we cross over murderers.
What's the difference between a psychic connecting with the dead versus actually helping them to cross over, like you're talking about?
A lot of psychics make a living at seemingly talking to a dead relative for the living. I want to connect with my dead husband. I want to ask him what to do. I want to talk to my little girl again. And I understand that feeling. My niece died when she was 6. So my brother died. You can't go through life without having someone you love die. I mean, it's just the nature of living and dying. But it creates what's called attachment. It doesn't help you to heal, and it absolutely does not help the soul who's died. What happens is if you're clinging and you're attaching to that soul, and it's like I had one soul explain it. He was an orthopedic surgeon. He was my neighbor, lived down the street, and he was in a motorcycle accident and died. And he appeared in my office one day and I said, "What are you doing here?" And he said, "If you don't help me, my family will never let me go." He said, "I can see these black cords. They're consuming me like this horrible vine of their grief and their pain, and I can't escape their pain."
Wow.
I never had a soul describe it to me that way. He said, "If you don't cross me over, I don't think I will ever escape." And he said, "I can," and I said, "You'll be able to do more for them in the heaven world than you will as a ghost." And he said, "Please." So I crossed him over right away. And he told me he'd led a wonderful life and he loved his family, but he really needed the peace of release. Now, if you have a family member who had a horrific cancer and you were the caregiver and you don't cross that cancer death, that person over, and they're haunting you, you can then take on the cancer they died of. That has happened repeatedly. And when you start questioning them, you find, wow, that is so weird. Yeah, my aunt did die of the same cancer. Did you cross her over? I didn't know I could do that. Let's take care of that for you. And a lot of times it's like their symptoms go away. Not every time. Then interesting. It's very interesting how that can work.
Yeah, we've talked about the crossing over prayer. Can you just walk us through what that is? And you've mentioned, you feel like everyone should be able to use it. So how does someone use it?
Well, you simply read it. And I have cards that can be printed on the website, and there's instructions on the back for the living and the dead. And you're basically asking God to take any and all souls who have found your divine light of service into the heaven world. You ask that every soul be wrapped in a blanket of healing light right now. You pray that every single soul who has found your divine light of service, provided by your angelic team, will make the transition into the heaven world right now. You're sending love and healing to all souls, no matter how they died, no matter their level of guilt, without any judgment or prejudice whatsoever. Right now, may the light of your love, Father, embrace and keep all of these souls now and forever. That's it. I keep it in my luggage. I keep it all over my house. I keep copies in my purse so that when somebody's coming toward me, the prayer simply takes care of them. And if you have a psychic child, this is the prayer for you. They're seeing ghosts. And I have Psychic Children, Psychic People is a massive book that explains what to do with a psychic child.
So, you we've also talked about the being haunted or ghosts coming in, and you said up to 60 ghosts can come in at a time, especially if you've had some alcohol. So, what happens when someone is being haunted but doesn't realize it? Are there signs that an outside observer could see?
You're distracted. You see something out of the corner of your eye, but you can't quite put your finger on it. It's like you're hearing something, but you can't can't tell. And you don't feel like you're alone. It's like you're something is bothering you. I had a woman in Texas call me. She said, there's somebody in my house. I can feel it. And she was stuttering. She was so upset. Ever since we moved here, you've got to help me. And she was just stuttering. And I said, girlfriend, I got this. She had four tall Texans in her downstairs bathroom watching her. And they thought she was the sweetest person they'd ever met. They had all been murdered by cattle rustlers right in about like 1867. They were all murdered. I do get years sometimes. And they didn't mean to harm her, but they really liked how she decorated the house because it was like their mama did. And once they were gone, she could use her bath. She just felt completely creeped out. And it may only affect you. Just because it affects you doesn't mean you're crazy. It's just something happened. I had a lady go to San Francisco for the weekend and she came home with a woman ghost who was a dance hall girl. The lady thought she was really cool, just came back with her. So we crossed her over. Sometimes it's just that simple. And sometimes you are encountering a ghost through stacks of time. I mean, if you look at not archaeology, geology, you look at the layers of sand and silt and whatever took place over the decades. Well, those are stacks of time that animals and human beings lived. And you're all standing on the same column of earth and you're all existing at the same time. We could do a whole dissertation on time. So when you're standing there and you're experiencing this, that ghost doesn't know you're there. I had a woman in Williamsburg call me. She bought this house and they really liked the house, but everybody in the house felt sad. They kept hearing something at night, but they couldn't figure it out. So she said, "Please, please tell me what's going on." So it took me a while, but I sifted through the stacks of time to find what was influencing her. There was a woman and her son who had a shack on this property where her house currently is in the 21st century in like 17, I guess 1770. Her husband was fighting with General Washington's forces and she and her 17-year-old son were there, and he was got to help her so they could survive. When, you know, King George's troops march up in full red uniforms, and her son rushes out with his long rifle, and the British lieutenant, just takes his pistol out and kills him right in front of the mother.
Wow.
And she started to scream, and her screams echoed through time. And that's what the family was hearing.
Wow.
They went into the house. This lieutenant said, light it on fire. They burned her house down. They killed her son. And when she's screaming and screaming, he shoots her.
Mm.
And it was only the fire that let settlers come in. And of course, there's no, you know, there's layers of earth now. So no one would ever know that she and her son died there. They were crossed over. What they thought they heard stopped. The house felt light again.
Wow.
So by going back through the stacks of time, over, 250 years or so, that could be resolved because those ghosts were so traumatized by their death. That's why there's no blanket statement for ghosts. Everybody's death is different. So, yeah, to answer your question there.
Yeah. So, how does someone know if their problems are medical or psychological versus spiritual or ghost related?
You literally have to sit down with a person and talk to them and find out what is the history and is this something that is spiritual? Because all illness has a spiritual cause. And one of the best books on that is Louise Hay's book, You Can Heal Your Life by Louise Hay, because in the back of the book, she lists the spiritual and emotional causes of all illnesses, or all the major ones. What causes, car accidents. I mean, it's really clear. You're angry and you draw that energy to you. So when you can see this cause and you step back and you look at your life differently, you might be able to tell. But usually, if you have suffered enormous trauma, you live in a level of fear that is it's like that fear is a subroutine that's always operating in your brain. And you always live in fear. That fear it just never quite leaves you. And you feel like you've been robbed of your power from an early age. So that makes you vulnerable because your auric field looks like Swiss cheese, which means any illness can come right into you. So the goal is to shore all that up, build emotional strength, and help the soul get their power back. Find out how to become powerful. For God's sake, stop surviving. I don't want to hear about survivors. I want people to say, I'm finally thriving. Survivors are hanging by their fingernails outside the window, and it's a long way down. A thriving person is they've come into the room and it's like, yes, I can have a good life. I don't have to just survive anymore.
What's one thing you wish more people understood about ghosts in the spirit world?
They need our help. They either don't understand they're dead. Religion didn't tell them what to do when death comes. It's a shock. I mean, if everyone listening asked themselves, if I died in the next 2 seconds, do I know what to do next? If you watch the movie Ghosts with Whoopi Goldberg and Patrick Swayze and the whole cast, he sees the light. He does not know what he's supposed to do. It's a great movie. When you see that light, for God's sake, go to the light. Don't worry about guilt. Your family's going to have to survive without you. Move into the light. And you will not believe the depth of love you will feel. It's going to just permeate your being on a level. And if you're afraid to leave the living, you'll be able to help them far more from the higher realms. There's a whole team of beings that will help you help your loved ones. And you will also stop attachment because when a ghost hangs around, it exacerbates the grief of the living. When the soul is crossed over, The grief of the living is still there, but it's significantly less because they can't tell the difference between their grief and the grief of the person who just died. That's what I would hope people would try to understand.
We've got a great community question. Bite Mark would like to know, what is your favorite poem?
My favorite poem, it's a poem about fairies. It's called The Secondhand Shop. I don't even remember who wrote it, but it's in the Elves and Fairies book. And it's the cutest. And I read it to my daughter so much that the two of us can say it together. And it's about understanding the deviant kingdom, the realms of nature. Don't try to change things. Sometimes everything has a purpose, even if you don't understand it.
I love that. I'll have to look that one up. And you said you don't remember who it's by?
I don't remember who it's by. I have the book in the other room and I read it to my grandchildren, but it's
I love
down in the
that.
hoppers hop and the flake. Katie did squirrel and the flutter moths flop. Down in the grasses where the beetles go plop. An old withered fairy keeps a secondhand shop. And they go on about what she has and how she uses those things. And, you know, don't feel sad over things that you lose. Maybe someone else can use.
I love that. I'll have to look that one up and find it and read it myself. That sounds like a really good one. Thank you for that. So we are coming up on our last couple of questions. If anyone has any questions they haven't asked yet tonight of Tina, feel free to pop those into the chat. We'll make sure to get them addressed while we are here and live. But Tina, what is your favorite life hack?
I guess my favorite life hack actually is the crossing over prayer because it simplifies and demystifies something that affects every single human being on earth. And if you can help others, living and dead, and you don't have to pay a medium to do it or decide whether or not to believe that medium. And it doesn't matter what church you go to because there's no religion in the afterlife. There's just the light of God and the light of Christ and all the other great ones. There's many, many, many amazing beings there. That would be probably my favorite one. And we all have wonderful hacks, but that one is a particularly powerful one.
It is time for the magic moment. My magic wand has lost its little tip here, but I think it'll still work. So, if you could wave a magic wand and eliminate one common opinion or misconception surrounding mental health, what would it be?
The drugs are the answer. Sometimes it's not just, sometimes drugs mask symptoms instead of helping the person understand that they could be haunted, that they have adrenaline poisoning, that the abuse or the trauma that they're experiencing has an unusual cause. One little boy lost his grandfather as they moved, so he lost his best friend, and his dad was a contractor and went to Iraq for 2 years. That threw him into an unstoppable adrenaline rush and rage where he almost killed his older brother. By calming him down, understanding his grief, and he was 12, I think, uncontrollable in school, and using the supplements for pyroluria, he became a completely different person. And his mother wasn't at her wit's end anymore, and he didn't kill his brother. Those are happy things. Drugs aren't always the answer.
Well, I am going to post your links one more time. I'll post those for anybody who joined us a little bit late and didn't get them at the very beginning. And while I do that, I'll just give you the floor if there's anything you want to talk about, anything you got coming up, or any resources or information you want to make sure that we get today. I'll just give you the floor while I post these.
Well, thank you so much. I do always push the crossing over prayer, but I recently published Psychic Children, Psychic People. As we're in supposedly a modern age, more and more children are extremely sensitive and are seeing or sensing things, and they should not be on drugs. They should be listened to. And this book is a guide for parents to know what the pitfalls are, how to tell if your child is lying, how to deal with people who don't believe it, and how to walk through this strange land of having children who can see a ghost standing next to you that you can't see. And then how to build a partnership with your child so that you and your child are doing spiritual service. Because at the end of the day, just like the work that you're doing, the spiritual service of helping others to find peace, health, and happiness. And maybe something somebody hears tonight helps them and that improves their marriage or their relationship with their family or their children or helps them understand their grief a little bit better. We're all going to die. And if we can help one another with the process, oh my gosh, it can change everything for all family members.
Yeah. Well, 488 says, thanks for sharing, and I'll echo that sentiment. Thank you so much, Tina, for being here. And he says, this was an interesting talk. I agree. A lot of this was really, really fascinating, and I'm so grateful that you took the time out to join us here. But yeah, just thank you.
Thank you so much for having me and letting me share all this. And hopefully, maybe it will be helpful to some of your listeners or maybe all of them in some way. Above all, feel empowered because this is teaching the living to help the dead. And it's a really awesome thing. Thank you
Yeah.
so much.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much for being here. Thank y'all for listening and for engaging tonight. Really appreciate it. Stick around because I'm going to disconnect with Tina and then I will be right back. And that is Tina Erwin. I genuinely did not know where that conversation was going to take us when we started. And I think that's one of my favorite things about this show. So much of what we carry around and label as a personality flaw or a mental health crisis or just the way I am has an actual explanation. The rage that comes out of nowhere, the anxiety that never fully lets go, the feeling that something is off in your body or your space or your life and you can't quite name it. Tina's whole approach is about looking at the full picture, the biological, the spiritual, the emotional, all of it, instead of just medicating one symptom and calling it a day. How many of us have been told to just go to therapy, just go to anger management, just take this medication, when the foundation of what's happening in our bodies has never actually been addressed? That's not a knock on therapy. Therapy is valuable, therapy is incredibly important, everyone should go to therapy. But if your nervous system is running on years of stored adrenaline and your body is depleted of the nutrients it needs to regulate itself, talk therapy alone has a ceiling. Tina's not the first person to point to nutrition and holistic care as part of the mental health conversation, but she connects it to trauma in a way that I found really clear and really practical. And then there's the ghost stuff, which honestly I think more people relate to than will admit out loud. Whether you believe in literal spirits or not, most of us have felt the weight of grief that does not seem to lift, or the sense that someone we lost is still somehow present in our day-to-day life. Tina's perspective that the living and the dead both need help moving forward, and that we have the ability to offer that help ourselves, that's something that we could latch onto. The Crossing Over Prayer is free on her website, and whatever your beliefs are, there's something genuinely comforting about the idea that we don't just have to sit with that weight and have no tools to work with. If this episode resonated with you, I would love it if you shared it with someone who might need to hear it. You can leave a review or a comment on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or wherever you're listening right now. It genuinely helps more people find the show. Of course, subscribe if you haven't already so you don't miss what's coming next. And come hang out with us in the community if you want to keep the conversation going. Go to the website, find us on Discord, and join us for our live conversations on Monday to ask questions while we're live. Until next time, give yourself the same kindness you'd give to a friend. Struggles don't erase your value. Even tacos fall apart, and that doesn't make them any less delicious.